we want to talk about today is kind of your concept of building, right? It's not one business. We're up to like maybe seven now. What inspires you to do more? You've had success already, right? A couple times in a couple of the businesses, yet you're going more. What are some of the things that inspire that? Does it come from opportunities you see? Does it come out of kind of forces of nature or things that are happening within the businesses? How do you identify those opportunities?
Yeah, great question. So my dad actually asked me this question last night. He said, I was complaining and I was saying, how busy I was and how I had a million different things to do. And I felt like, even if I worked for the next month straight, I wouldn't be caught up because I have so many projects that are going on.
Right.
So, whether it's building, new real estate projects or, going into a new business venture. And he said, why do you do this to yourself? Like, why are you doing it? And I was
Right.
like, I don't know. I don't know. Why am I doing that? I guess maybe he's right. Maybe I shouldn't be piling so many different things on. But every time I see something, like I want to do it. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's kind of like whenever you walk into a restaurant hungry and you see everything on the menu, imagine just being like, oh well, I want all of these things. Like I want to order all of them. I'm kind of that way whenever it comes to business. So I see something, I know that it's a good deal, I know that there's money to be made. It could be an exciting project, so I want to do it. So I take it and I put it on my plate, right?
Hmm.
But the problem is that my plate's so full that it's going to take me a very long time to eat everything.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why you have to either get better at delegating, right? Where you bring other people to the table to help you eat that platter, or, reality is it's just going to take a long time to accomplish everything that is on your plate. So that's where I'm trying to get better as a leader, is figuring out ways to take everything that we have going on and trying to delegate and build up and elevate other people around me, so that the next time that I have something that I want to order, instead of putting it on my plate, it instantly goes to theirs. They're capable and they can run with it. Going back to like, why do I do it? I think that for me, I think that business is a little bit like a hobby for me. I find excitement in it. And, whether it's, you know, I think it's almost like a puzzle, right? So some people love doing puzzles on the weekends. And what they're doing is they're trying to figure out ways to put the pieces together to have a complete picture. So, the idea of Bitcoin mining, to me, it was this foreign concept that I didn't know anything about. And there are a lot of different questions. And I think that walking through that process and now all of a sudden being on the other side of it and knowing how it's done and how to replicate it and do it again, to me is, interesting. I have that knowledge or that expertise now. The same thing is what I'm getting in building coffee shops and pizza places. Like, I'm going to learn so much throughout all these different processes. And then hopefully there's something that I take away from one business that might be applicable in another. So yeah, just keep the challenges coming.
What? So there's option on everything, right? Choose your example. You look at a menu. Probably everything on there tastes good because it went through a taste test. But you have certain preferences,
Yeah.
right? What are some of the things that you look for that helps you determine it goes on the plate? And maybe use Bitcoin as an example if you
Sure. There's lots of things I don't like on a menu. I don't like anything with olives, for example. If I see that, I'm out. So, for me, I need to see something where I believe that it's scalable. If it's not scalable, it at least has to be a lot of fun, right? Like, I need to get
want.
some type of other enjoyment out of it. For example, I think it'd be fun to operate a sports bar, right?
Yeah.
That would just be more, I think that'd be fun. Whether it's Bitcoin mining, that's something that is largely scalable, right? You figure out how to do it at one site and then you go and you build another site or you expand that existing site. For Pilot Pizza and Aviator, same thing. I think about some of the successful food and beverage franchises, right? So a lot of them have actually been started here in Illinois.
Yeah.
So Jimmy John's, I believe Dairy Queen was
Yeah.
started here. McDonald's wasn't necessarily started here, but the guy, the founder, right?
Yep.
So there's been a lot of success in food and beverage franchises, and I look and say, okay, well, Papa John's did it. If Little Caesars did it, why couldn't I do it with Pilot Pizza? And for the coffee, we see, I think Scooters came out of Nebraska. It's like we could do the same thing. We could have the next successful chain. So scalable, something that I would shy away from. It would be something where I don't believe that I would be able to hire somebody to run with a concept and scale it. So if it really required me to be 100% all in, and honestly, I think about Lucky Lincoln sometimes and I'm like, should I still have Lucky Lincoln? Because it's so relationship focused. And Dan Robertson and I were talking about this yesterday about how nice Cloud9 Cannabis is, because you build the store, you staff it, you hire somebody to do the marketing piece, and from there you're looking and you're analyzing a profit and loss statement, and you have it, it's done. Like, you can change your vendors out or do whatever, but you don't have to go and schmooze anybody anymore.
Yeah.
But on the gaming piece, I have 200 and something customers where it's relationship based. And if I don't go and hang out with those people or call them or do whatever, I'm at risk of losing that business. And that's one of the nice things about going into retail businesses or going into real estate, is you don't have that piece.
Right.
So I would never go into another relationship based business personally. And if I did go into it, so one thing that they say is relationship based is banking.
Mm-hmm.
It's very relationship based.
100%. Yeah.
So if I were to ever go into that, I would just need to be completely, hey, I'll never go into the business development world. I'm only going to be able to be as successful as the people that I'm able to add to the team. So that's a big element for me.
Scalability. One of the things you're basically highlighting is it's hard to scale yourself in terms of time, right?
Yes. So what I've realized is I'm a great salesperson for gaming, just because I know it extremely well. And I've spent a lot of time trying to build up the different divisions of the company, where I've kind of stepped back, and it's one of the mistakes I've made actually, is I've stepped back and said, okay, well, I also need to focus on our marketing department, and I need to focus on our operations department, and I need to focus on our finance department. So I've had my hands in all of these different divisions, as opposed to hiring and managing somebody for those particular positions. As a result, we've our sales team hasn't been as effective as I was out in the field. And I wish that the last couple of years I would have spent focusing on business development and sales, as opposed to spending my time in the other divisions of the company.
Yeah. So you mentioned scalability. You mentioned a couple times with both Pilot and Aviator, so and so did this. Why couldn't I? There are some entrepreneurs out there that think they have to get started by doing the new thing that hasn't been done, which is much different than, well, there already is a Portillo's. There already is a Papa John's pizza.
Yes.
So when you approach that and say, why couldn't I do that? What's your angle? Why do you feel, what do you bring to the table on that?
I think that somebody who has a product, a service, a business that is successful, I think that a lot of times it's possible for somebody to come in and be better than them. So for me, I you hear people talk.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the successful businesses that people talk about? They talk about gaming, right? People know that there's a lot of money in gambling. They talk about cannabis. People talk about, building long-term generational wealth through real estate.
Mm-hmm.
So sounds like it's probably a pretty good thing to get into, right?
Right.
And obviously there's been the Bitcoin craze for a while now, and it's had its ups and downs, but that's one of the reasons I got into it, was
Yep.
because you kind of hear about the craze, and I knew that one was a lot riskier than the others. But storage shed facilities, everybody talks about how profitable self-storage is. So when you hear people talk about these industries or these markets that are extremely profitable, I just pay attention to it. And then you have to approach it with, okay, is it a fad? Is it this something that's going to be really hot for a while, but then it's eventually going to tank? So another thing that you got to be careful of is think about like CBD stores.
Mm-hmm.
People were talking about how profitable those were, and I personally stayed away from that. My stepsister wound up building a CBD store. I told her not to. I told her to stick to gaming, but she lost. And I told her to stay away from it because I said, "You're you got to analyze the market. What's your competitive advantage to have a retail store versus people just buying CBD? There's no government license that prevents somebody from getting it online, unlike cannabis or gaming, right? Like you need to actually get a government issued license. So I think that the regulations behind those industries creates at least some type of a barrier to entry, and you don't have that in CBD. I also wondered whether, as recreational was going to come on board, are people really that interested in CBD? Is it like a long-term thing? So there's certain things like that. And then another one that I heard just got overbuilt was the drive-through car wash tunnels.
Hmm.
They can still be profitable if you have a good market, but there were certain markets where people just overbuilt them. There was, there's not really a barrier to entry besides getting a, you know, zoning and special use permit from a city. But if they're willing to give them to anybody, then you want to probably not go into a market where there's too many within a certain geography.
Interesting. So talked about, and the advice you gave your sister was to, you have to analyze the market. Love to hear a little bit about how you do analyze a market. You personally, what are some of the things you look for? So some things you talked about is barrier to entry, competition. What else factors into that?
Yeah, so I think that that's one reason that almost all of the businesses that I've started have been in Illinois, is just because it's I've analyzed this market pretty much up and down from a gaming perspective, and I don't know how I would go and open up another business in another state because I don't know that market, and the amount of time and effort that I would need to dedicate to traveling there, driving around, and really like getting a proper feel for it, it would just be too time consuming.
Pizza. Let's take pizza for example. Pilot Pizza.
Sure.
There are probably within, well, you'd probably know the actual answer to this. I say estimate there's probably a pizza joint within 5 blocks of every address in Chicago or something like that.
Yeah.
So we'd love to know a little bit about why pizza, why here, and what the angle is. Who are you doing it better than, or aiming to do it better than in that case?
Fair. All right. So there's a lot of good pizza out there. And also, I think that pizza is one of those things where you're going to have a preference depending on your mood and your appetite. Like sometimes I like deep dish.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like New York style. Sometimes I like St. Louis style, which is basically Emos. It's a different type of cheese.
Yeah.
So I'm always going to have a different type of preference, but I like eating a bunch of different pizzas. Every once in a while, well, usually I try to stay away from the like cheap chain ones.
Sure.
I really don't like Domino's.
Yeah.
Some people like it. I personally have always disliked it.
Yeah.
I think that the quality of a lot of pizzas have gone down over the last couple decades as you know you have these big corporations and they're trying to find ways to reduce their expenses. And the way that they can drive up profit margins is by saying, hey, if we went with this type of a wheat, or, if we maybe blended our cheese with just a little bit, cheaper, ingredients. So over time, I think a lot of those big players have started to create worse products.
Mm-hmm.
Either that or I'm just getting older. I don't know. But I remember Papa John's and Pizza Hut being a lot better than what they are today.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think that what I'm trying to do is I want to create something that is better than, Pizza Hut, Papa John's, Domino's, like your big Little Caesars, like
Mm-hmm.
especially, all those chains. I think I can create something that's better than that. Is it going to be better than, my one of my favorite pizzas is Salerno here in Chicago? No, it's not going to be better than Salerno's. I really like Salerno's, but they're a smaller chain and they're not doing it at scale, so they're still hand tossing their pies, etc. We want to make fresh dough, so we don't want to have it frozen like a Little Caesars or whatever. But for consistency, we want to throw it through a whatever, a dough roller or whatever it is. So I want to create something that's a little bit more elevated, but the price of a Little Caesars pizza is $5.99. What do you expect? Like they have to have really super cheap ingredients. So I want real ingredients. I don't know what our price point's going to be, but I would like for it to be closer to like $15 to $20. But then, you go and buy a Salerno's pizza and it's $30, right?
Right.
So they're charging that, that premium, and we want something that's got good profit margins, but we understand that we're selling more at scale and we're not running a full fine dining restaurant. We're running a pizza shop and we're cranking out good quality pizzas that are better than your crappy chain options.
Yeah. Interesting. So I want to stay on pizza for a minute because we're also talking about kind of entering. So you mentioned, business is a hobby. I could probably do this too. Sounds like you haven't made a lot of pizzas before getting a pilot. So what's your approach to learning about the actual business itself?
So,
How do you make a pie?
sure.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I haven't done this in a very long time, but whenever I was in college, and well, really when I was in college, after I graduated, I just got too busy. But I used to love to bake and cook. So I would actually make homemade pizzas in college. I would, roll the dough, do the whole 9 yards, make my, pizza was one of the big things that I would make. Getting into it, I didn't want to like come up with the recipe or do anything like that. So we went and engaged a consultant. So there was a pizza academy, believe it or not, here in Chicago. We went, we visited them, we did a bunch of taste tests. We we analyzed different sauces and pizzas and stuff like that. So yeah, we analyzed a bunch of different pizza doughs, and then we analyzed a bunch of sauces, and then we came up with which one we thought was best, and that's pretty much what we're going to roll out with. And then down the road, I figured that just like Aviator, we're going to continually refine the recipe, and that's just part of what it is. So I don't want to just do one or two. I want to do dozens and dozens of these. So I figured if we roll out with one recipe for the first five, we can change it at a later date. It won't have that big of an impact. People are just looking for something that's, again, quality. So if it's, you know, let's say I give it a 6 out of 10 whenever it launches, and then we elevate it eventually to an 8 out of 10 with, a 10 out of 10 being like the best pizza in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the goal.
Interesting. So, and a quick question, because I think it's interesting to think about where your time is spent with these. And a lot of entrepreneurs interchange two words constantly, I and we. So you said, we went to Pizza Academy. Did you go to Pizza Academy?
I did.
Yeah,
I went
okay.
to Pizza Academy, believe it or not. But yes, so I went, but brought the team with me. So there was probably 5 or 6 of us that went through it.
Gotcha. And was that team from a group that you pull into these initial ventures, or is that do you have to go out and find pizza people? Tell us about the team that you got.
Yeah, it was just our team. It was like people that it was Ryan, Roger, Alex, Chris, and maybe there was somebody else there. I don't remember. But yeah.
So your tasting team.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
good.
people that, I value their feedback,
Yeah.
really. And at the end of the day, like, they're just the average people that can tell you whether or not they like a pizza.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need a food critic, professional food critic, because, sometimes they might overthink it. The professional pizza person was the person that was giving us the training and showing
Right.
us all the different options and giving us his recommendations. So
Right.
we already had the pizza expert there.
There's only so many pizza experts walking into pizza shops to eat pizza.
Yeah.
Most of the common people. But market research. So a couple of things you said is people want a pizza that how much of that is insight, sampling. There's a lot of analysis paralysis in people starting new businesses.
Yeah.
So, some might go and pull up market data. I know when we were talking Lucky Lincoln, you were able to pull a lot of information offline on all the different locations and what they were producing, etc. How much is how much is too much and how much is too little in terms of understanding that target audience the business is going to serve?
Well, for me, the pizza place was a little bit of an easier, trigger to pull, because I already had a space in West Loop where, I was looking around, and there's right off of Randolph, there's not really any chain pizza places. There's no quick, like, grab a slice shop up and down that whole area, which is surprising
That
because
is
there's
surprising, yeah.
there's like 5 different taco joints now, but there's no pizza.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, there's probably a need for it. I know that the labor is cheap, and this used to be a gelato store, so I could probably convert it pretty easily. It's already got the walk-in freezer, build a counter, get some equipment in there. I was hoping to get up and running for under 100 grand. The build out cost, whatever, maybe 80, 90 grand. The equipment did still cost quite a bit, but I bought all new equipment, and if the shop doesn't work out, I'm going to go and try another retail location with it. So I figured, why not? It's going to cost less than 100 grand to build it out. I alone am probably going to bring $5,000 to $10,000 worth of pizzas on the boat this summer,
Right.
because I always, wind up bringing food. So I thought, let's just do it. It'll be easy, convenient. I'll be able to monitor it a little bit. I'll be able to pop down, ask some questions whenever I've got some spare time at 10 p.m. at night or on the weekends or whatever. So I decided to just roll the dice and go ahead and try it.
Got it.
That was my decision making process, I suppose.
So it sounds like you saw different ways to get out of it if it didn't work out. So you had some plan Bs lined up.
Yeah.
The
So we're definitely, if you think about a pizza place, there's a million of them, right? Like you mentioned, there's one on every single block. Maybe the first location's not a hit. Maybe I lose a little bit of money, but I should be able to shift it over and eventually get my money back. It's just a matter of how long does it take, and is it a business that's worth pumping a bunch of extra money in to get to 50 locations, or am I better off saying, whatever, I built out these couple locations, it didn't work out as well, I'm going to sell them and never go back into pizza, but put more of my money in cannabis.
So the idea to have the New York versus, it sounds like there's an element of creativity when you're coming up with these ideas as well. Is that mostly coming from your own thoughts? Like, that's clever. Detroit versus New York in Chicago.
Yeah. So I was looking at some like inspirational designs of other pizza shops,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw some type of like mural, and that's when I like got the idea of doing the New York versus Detroit. I forget. I think it was like a New York mural, and then I just thought, but yeah, I think that coming up with names and branding, a lot of the times I will ask people different ideas, and I hear a million different ones, and then every once in a while, like I kind of know it immediately when somebody says a name. I'm like, I actually really like that. Like that's a great name, and then I'll roll with it. And sometimes I'm not quite satisfied with the name, and I'm like, I don't know, it's okay, but I really don't want to proceed with it. But Cloud9, when somebody mentioned it at a party, I actually asked a few guys at a party, and one was like, I got the perfect name, call it Cloud9 Cannabis. I was like, okay, done. I like it, let's go.
It is a great name.
And the same thing with Lucky Lincoln. I was asking a buddy, we were at a bar, and I was like, I have to file my LLC tomorrow. What should I name it? And I was like, do I name it like Rehberger, vending? Do I name it, JR Gaming? Like, what do I call this company? He's like, no. He's like, I got the perfect name. He goes, all right, so Illinois is the land of Lincoln, so you should call it Lucky Lincoln Gaming. I was like, He goes, you could have this little mascot of a guy throwing money around like the Monopoly guy. I was like, done. All right, let's go. So here's the branding. So I went and filed the paperwork the next day. The other failed venture was Bitcoin ATMs. So I thought that the name was okay. We got the name Lucky Coin, and that was our Bitcoin ATMs. So the Lucky Coin ATMs, and basically that was another case of me not having the time to dedicate to doing the research. I knew from other people in the space that it was extremely profitable, or could be. Had some location owners that were telling me what they were making off the ATM that was in their stores. So I went, and I should have taken a little bit more of a measured approach, but it was one of those things where I decided to buy a bunch of equipment right off the bat, and I did it because I wanted to get the equipment before the year end for tax purposes.
Sure.
So I wanted to be able to claim the depreciation.
Yeah.
I basically rushed into it and was thinking about the money I was going to have to pay in taxes. If I didn't buy them right then, I shouldn't have done that. I allowed myself to be pressured by a deadline, and I shouldn't have done that. So after I bought the machines, I also didn't have the time to go around, study the market, and figure out what a good marketing plan would be. I thought just put them in and they'll wind up being successful, and that was not the case.
Huh.
So
what is that?
So I sold them all basically for like cents on the dollar just to get out.
Really?
Yeah.
What are now, was that something where that market isn't successful, so no one was crushing it in Bitcoin ATMs? Was it placements? Was it
I think it was placements, and I think that it was also marketing strategy. So we were able to get into certain gas stations, but I don't think that they were in the. I think that that's more demographic driven,
Hmm.
and I also think that these days, like, why would you go to an ATM and pay like 11%, 10 or 11% to convert cash into Bitcoin when you can just do it on a mobile app?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people do that. I think the people that don't are the people that are in lower income communities that are also trying to convert cash into Bitcoin.
Right.
So it was an industry that I thought would be successful maybe everywhere, and then realized that it's probably something that wasn't worth us pursuing.
So you mentioned on that the marketing was off. You've mentioned marketing a couple times. Would love to know how you go about coming up with a marketing strategy, how involved you are in it, and maybe you can tell that through a successful marketing strategy that you've had. What was it? How'd you get to it? How did you measure it?
Yeah. I would say for me, the only real marketing strategy that I've dove into has been with Lucky Lincoln. So I rolled up my sleeves and developed a proprietary marketing kiosk for our gaming locations. So that was a physical kiosk that people would come in, they would register, and then I built out the back end, the reports, the features, etc. Thankfully, I do realize that marketing requires somebody's complete attention, and we now have people on board that are much better at it than I'm going to be,
Mm-hmm.
because that's their area of focus. So now I try to just hear what the plan is for the marketing rollouts for the different companies, and maybe I'll interject or provide some opinions, but for the most part I let the marketing team handle everything from
Gotcha.
here on out.
Gotcha. So interesting. The Would it make sense to explore Aviator? So you've got one out there, you got more coming in. What is the marketing strategy there? What are some of the things that you're seeing your team has done that's working or not working, and how do you evaluate that?
Yeah, so I think for food and beverage concepts, you need a multifaceted approach. You need traditional marketing, which is going to be mailers, basic
Mm-hmm.
mailers, billboards, things like that. So people need to know that the location is open. So some of it's just exterior signage on the physical location, but if you can find a billboard that is going to gain a lot of visibility in that local area, that's perfect. And then outside of traditional print and billboards, etc., then there's the social media aspect. So Alex and the marketing team have been very good at building up the different pages, making sure that everything online, from your Google and Yelp reviews, you want to make sure that they're as high as possible. I'm one of those people that if I see a coffee shop has a 3.6 Google rating, I'm out. I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really important to have somebody that's monitoring and controlling that online presence. And then another thing that I think drives people back is loyalty programs. So
Mm.
if you're able to capture the data from your customers and you're able to send them push notifications and say, hey, guess what? Come on in for, a 99-cent large latte. You might be able to drive them back into the door, especially if they haven't been to Aviator in the last 60 to 90 days. So I think that putting those plans of action in place, and then also putting incentive, whether it's incentive programs for store employees or somehow driving our employees to get customers to sign up in the first place for the loyalty program, is very important. So combination of all those different things, and then also at the end of the day, you got to have a good product, right? So I feel as though I've been pretty vocal about it to the team. I wasn't happy with the food menu, which is why I insisted on additional improvements. Quite pleased with the menu at this point. I think it's a lot better than what it was. And last week I actually had my dad swing out there and pick up a bunch of sandwiches. He brought them back for a bunch of friends and family, and they all said how it was great. Right? If you compare that to a traditional fast food place, it's a lot better, right? Actual fresh, real ingredients that are, eggs are actually cooked on a stove as opposed to microwaved.
Right.
So having a good product will automatically create that repeat business. And I could see our marketing team and our, you know, aviator team basically button heads a little bit, where the marketing team is like, hey, I want to have 5-star reviews, but I can't get there if your food sucks.
Yeah.
So you gotta work on your food so that we can get to the 5 stars. But what do you want us to do if you can't get the product to where it needs to be? So we fixed that, we've ironed that out, new menu, and now we should be all good.
So you've got a marketing team and an aviator team. Do you share, or at least that's how you predicted? Is the marketing team people that work across your businesses? We're talking. Alex is one of those folks, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we do have shared resources. The marketing team is the only one that's actually split. So what I mean by that is our finance and accounting department is across all entities, but for marketing, there's so much demand on both the Cloud9 cannabis and the aviator slash take flight hospitality front that we know that they're very, very, very busy, and there's no way that we could bother them with what's going on over at Lucky Lincoln.
Right.
So Lucky Lincoln is its own standalone marketing team, and then Cloud9 and Take Flight have shared marketing resources between the two.
Got it. Okay.
And eventually, hopefully, the idea is that both companies will be able to scale to a point in which there's no longer that inter company shared resource, and each one has a dedicated department.
Right. So stay in aviator for a second. I know we'll talk more about that when we're over there. But change the menu because you didn't like the food. Talked about loyalty programs as a way to get people coming back. Obviously, there's build out costs and that sort of thing. If I was asked the question, is it performing where it needs to be performing for you or yet? Or how do you evaluate Bitcoin ATMs? You ripped them out at some point.
Yeah.
Right? Aviator Coffee's moving. What are you looking at? What are your expectations? How do you decide it's working or not?
Well, Aviator's a little bit of a bigger risk than a Pilot Pizza just because the acquisition cost of the building plus the build out, you're talking over $1 million to get into Westchester. The next site that we do, we're probably also looking at, 1.5, maybe even $2 million to, build a, a little bit of a larger store is what
Okay.
we'd be looking to do. So you've got a lot of sunk costs that, yeah, sure, could we resell it and put another food and beverage operator in there that thinks they could do a better job? Yeah, but we're still going to be walking away with some losses there. It's possible that Westchester and that particular site wasn't the best site that we could have launched in. So we need to open, and I'm committed to opening a few stores just in case the first one wasn't, it could have been a dud, or, it might be better. Like the next one we open might be worse, right? You just never know. We're seeing the ramp up in the aviator sales that we need to see, particularly since we've changed out the food menu.
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing too bad. We are losing money month over month, which was to be expected in the food and beverage industry. I would say that if we're not at least break even slash a little profitable by the end of, I'll say by the end of August, I would start to get a little concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got maybe 3 more months to kind of look and see whether or not we're at least break even. And then if we are, I'm set. Like, I'd probably feel confident enough to roll out another 5 stores just based on the fact that it's gotten break even so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you do put on? So let me I want to structure this question the right way because it's an important one. I think where I'm coming from is a lot of people will take a calculated risk that calculates really well, and still everyone around them think they're crazy. How would you ever do that? Right. So Pilot Pizza sounded like I'm not going to get burned too bad if this doesn't work out. I got another plan.
Okay.
Aviator kind of feels the same way with just higher,
Sure.
with just more money.
Yep.
What's a business that you've approached that really required you to get out the spreadsheets, do the modeling, etc., and not just
Yeah. What you're saying. I would say that none of them as of now. Now, if I were to go and do a very large acquisition, and let's say for example the gaming space,
mm-hmm.
if I were to go and pick up a competitor, and you're talking something that would sink me, like go and spend like $100 million buying, a smaller competitor. If I'm signing a purchase agreement for that amount, I'm going to go. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to go and meet with who their customers are to understand, like, what these contracts look like, how ironclad they are, whether there's any risks. I'm going to be, calling my lobbyists to figure out whether, iGaming is about to get launched like 3 months down the road, or something that could plummet the revenues to where I wouldn't be able to pay back that $100 million, and then all of a sudden I'm living back home with mom or something.
Right.
So I don't want that. So
Okay, so fair enough, and it is interesting because luckily in a way was the first success that allowed you to jump into these other ventures.
yeah,
Right, that's the cash cow, for lack of a better word, and that was started with a degree of analysis and exposure to the market when you first, and that was the story that we kind of learned last time. So in a way, it seems what gets you started in a market is observing something, saying I can do that, and I'm interested in it.
yeah. Some people might say that me getting distracted by some of these other business ventures was not smart. Some people would say that. Maybe I would say that. I don't know. Gaming is very profitable, and I wonder whether I would have been more successful simply focusing on gaming as opposed to going into these other lines. I do think I do think that it's easy to feel that way now based off of the financial statements, but the cannabis company alone could equal what the profitability of Lucky Lincoln is within the next like 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm kind of like, well, maybe it was a good thing that I went and rolled the dice on some of these other business ventures and expanded afterwards. But whenever I was first starting up, yes, I think it's very important to be laser focused on one thing until you build it to a size in which you know can take a step back and start to look at other things. But I became, if you think about how people become successful, a lot of times it's not necessarily that they're the most, you know, uh, naturally gifted. It's that they have the most experience. So, I think you can look at a lot of athletes, for example. They, from an athleticism perspective, aren't, the best, but they've dedicated the time to study, refine, get better, improve, etc. And that's what makes them a standout athlete, because the other person wasn't willing to put in the hard work and dedication because other things were more important to them in their life. So if you're crazy obsessive about anything, any particular industry, you can become a leading expert in that field. And when you know more than all of the other people that are playing the same game as you, obviously you're gonna do better at that game.
Right.
So, and there's in the game of business, there's 100,000 different games, right? You just got to pick one. And my cousin used to always tell me, yeah, I was like, I think I'm interested in this, but I don't know, maybe I should do something different because I think that it's a better industry. There's more money in it. And he would always tell me, he said, Jeffrey, if you like something and you become the best at it, there's always money to be made. So I think that there's a lot of truth to that. Maybe not as much money as gaming, but you can do anything and still make a lot of money.
Interesting. So a cousin's entered the picture too. We don't have to get into him. Earlier, you were talking about how you have a team that you mentioned Roger. We've met a couple of the other folks that, and the way you described them was, I just trust their opinions. Would love to know what you look for in folks like that in building your team. What is the value that kind of they demonstrate, and if it's easier to do this by breaking down each of those individuals, you
Sure.
can. But that's always a struggle when people are selecting business partners or their first hires or who they seek mentorship from.
Yeah, I think that trust, people say, is built over time,
Yeah.
right? You can't be foolish to go and trust somebody from day one, but you start to see people, their behaviors, how they act. And to me, I love people that will just give me candid feedback. Sometimes I don't, if somebody will tell you something that you don't want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
that's when, for me, that's when I really start to build that trust with them. And some people don't want to hear the truth,
Right.
right? All right, I kind of want to tell this story,
Yeah.
so I'll go ahead and do it. I've got a buddy who was dating this girl, and some red flags, right? And I was a little blunt about it, right? I'm sometimes outspoken with people that I consider to be my friends, right? And I think
Right.
that that's just part of telling somebody. And I said, this is how I feel. And he's like, well, you better watch what you say, because you know if that's how you feel, maybe you're not going to get invited to the wedding. Like, well, look, I'm telling you because you're my friend. And if you want people that are going to sit around you and not tell you how they feel, then that's because those people probably aren't your friends, right?
Yeah.
Like, what you would expect somebody to be forthright with you. So I'm telling you that now. I'm not going to go and be mean to her or say it to her face, but you need to know that that's how I feel, right? I've said it. Now we can move on from it. And I think still he was upset. He didn't really take what I said well, but you hear those stories about other people where they say, oh, well, I got married and then I got divorced. And then after I got divorced, all my buddies were like, oh, we saw all these red flags and then,
Right.
we wanted to tell you, but we didn't. And it's like, no, if you're their friend,
Right.
you tell them what you see.
Yeah.
And I love surrounding myself with people that do that. That, if I'm out of line or if I've done something, they call out my bullshit. And if they see something, they'll mention it and say, hey, I saw this. Keep an eye out on it. Blah
Yeah.
blah blah. So I'm not gonna say that everybody at that pizza tasting was exactly that person,
Sure.
but a few of them were. And Roger in particular, I love having him around because he doesn't have much of a filter, and you are gonna get his mind,
What's
which is great. So
what's a good story of Roger giving you his mind on something you didn't want to hear?
man, I don't know that I can think of anything specific, but there have been times where he'll tell me something that, and he always, he's got great delivery, he's got great communication skills. So he'll say something or put it in a way where it will make me rethink how I'm behaving sometimes. And, maybe I change like a course of action on some decision making within a company based on his feedback. So,
So he picks up on kind of the tone of the other people and that sort of thing.
yeah, he's very aware of how everybody feels. He provides me with a lot of insight and advice. And that's the thing is sometimes people don't tell me what they think because they're nervous to do that. And with him, he lets me know how he sees things, and then sometimes that calls for like a course correction on how I'm handling something or how I'm approaching something.
Yeah, there's probably a word for it, but when you're the boss, you don't always hear all the
Yeah, a
all
lot
the
of
stuff.
a lot of people don't want to come to you and tell you something that's going on,
Yeah.
even if it's like, sometimes even if it's like an emergency. you know?
How do you, when you find people like that, how do you keep them?
Well, I think that people I think people stay for two reasons. I think that they're happy with what they're doing and that they are working with a team that they really enjoy working with.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest aspect of keeping somebody is, they eventually become like a friend.
Right.
And then that's not true in all companies, right? A lot of people will come, clock in, clock out, go home,
Right.
but those are also the people that are treating it purely as a job. So when you've got somebody like Roger who's more integrated, and now all of a sudden, like, I know his family, he knows my family. Now it's like a very personal relationship, and I think that, while we're staying busy, he does love what he's doing. And
Yeah.
he's like, you know, I just think it's neat to be able to work on so many different things and, see the results at the end of the day.